we're following the same path Glenn did when he founded the company. It's much easier because you didn't have to build out the infrastructure. You didn't have to go through that growing pain of like onboarding and how difficult it was. You didn't have to do any of that. Now you get just to use the platform. The hard part is building the platform. Hence the reason why he's rewarded disproportionately.
Would you start with a copycat when you could go with one that's already established?
Yeah. You also understand that like all of those other companies aren't actually innovating. Glenn's the one that innovated. Yeah, he innovated, and now those other ones, what all they do is they mess with the numbers a little bit and try to call it something new. It's not. It's like having somebody who made, like there's Coke, and then you put a little bit more cinnamon in and you're like, oh, this is like better than Coke. And you're like, no. I guess so. You know what I mean?
Or I've heard of even startup companies, and I don't remember the name of them, where they had investors.
Yeah.
And the investors said, we only want 3 levels.
Right.
And it's not starting with the agent
in mind, in the end, and the equity to the agents.
Yeah.
But the only way he would know that is by being an agent and asking for equity and being told no.
When he told that story and he said, I was the largest agent in Prudential, and I asked for ownership.
They said no.
And they said no.
Yeah.
And then I went to Keller Williams.
Same.
Thinking, oh, there was still no ownership.
Yeah. They gave him 1% ownership of an office.
Yeah.
Which is not ownership in the company.
Correct.
That's exactly right. Yeah. And the other takeaway I have when he's explaining it is like, oh, well, he said we have to build a defensible business model that is not reliant on brick and mortar.
Yes.
And what would cause people to move away from brick and mortar? Equity and rev share. That's what would do it.
And he said that's what he would do. And it was right after he told that agent, we're not having offices.
Right.
And then he goes, oh, that's a good idea.
That's a good idea.
¿Me está tomando foto?
Gracias. Sí.
Yes.
It's like laid out. Like
That's right. Coast to coast, Mexico.
Imagine what he said, which was an incredible idea, is he's got 10, 12 years of notes. How much quantity of notes do we all have that we could just refer back to?
How many notes do you have, bro?
A lot of
How many recordings do you have?
A lot of recordings.
Right. Even from way back. From everything that we've ever been to. Yeah.
Because think about what you write down. What you write down are like the gems, your nuggets.
Yeah.
But how often do we go back to it? Probably not enough. So that's a heck of a reason to go back.
Yeah.
The lady that spoke on stage, who is in Atlanta and also in England, wasn't that her idea?
she
said,
said.
I just went back into all my notes from every single. She was awesome.
I love her too. Thinking big, like internationally. She's thinking so big.
Yeah, she's all over the world.
Yeah, she's going all over the world. She's like, oh, I have an office here, I have an office there.
Yeah. But she seems to be more. But she also seems to be focused on production.
She does.
Yeah.
But I think it's cool because
I've
she
also-
has like a very specific avatar, which is like,
Yeah.
African American, mostly women.
Yeah.
That she's just teaching them exactly how she did it.
Yeah.
So that they can be.
And she was no nonsense about like what is actually required to be successful.
Right.
I thought another cool takeaway is for agents that want lead generation. They're like, yeah, just go into what's it called and ask. Go into what's the Facebook workplace and ask for open houses. I was like, oh, that's kind of cool. You could have agents in all the agents in Texas do that. It doesn't have to be your properties.
The last build event in Houston, no doubt, is what it was. And the guy on stage, Beard, I think his name was Beard, Dan Beard. He was talking about giving people the guarantee.
Aggressive guarantees. You did that.
I implemented that right after.
And you told me you keep taking listings as a result of it, right?
So when he said about guaranteeing a seller, not so much the guarantee, but the commission, the menu of commission options. Definitely. So I went into a guy who was a FISBO. He says, I'm not going to use your services. That's perfectly fine. I'm okay if you don't use your services. Half of the way to the presentation, I'm not going to hire you. I said, no, that's perfectly fine. He says, I'm going FISBO. I said, cool. So you said you want to go FISBO. This is the 0% option. If you sell the house on your own, you owe me absolutely nothing. If you find the buyer, 2% if I help you do everything. And if there's another agent involved, it'll be 6%. So what I've learned with that is that you offer that 6% commission sellers don't even flinch when you say 6%.
Yeah.
But if you do it the traditional method, they're always trying to take you down from
Well,
6 to 5 to 4.
I think it's psychological because it's anchoring the lower one, and they're focused on that. And it's also a probability thing, where they think the probability that the first two options are going to happen is much higher than it actually is. So that they perceive that you're taking a massive risk, when you know it's actually the opposite, where it's like a 98% chance that the last one happens.
It's almost like they don't really hear the 6%. They just hear 0. If I sell them out, I don't do anything.
Their emotion and their ego is involved enough to where it causes them to think, wow, I'm going to do this, and I have an out just in case.
It's literally on how you. It's a presentation. It's all how you present it. When you present it in that linear way of 0 to 6, you're right. They don't even hear the 6.
But that required you, Chris, to be very open-minded, because you were accustomed to presenting in a traditional way with one option.
And this is, you gave them the option to where they could pay you nothing. They're like, wow, I like that.
Yeah, I like that, and that's what they focus on. That's dope.
And at the end, if they ultimately have to pay the 6%, they're cool with it.
Yeah, they're like, okay, that was part of the deal.
Have you ever had anyone argue with you about the 6%?
No.
Wow.
If your presentation is tight, you don't get any commission objections.
Yeah,
Well, most of mine are all 6.
yeah.
But you're running through it and you're leading them and you're helping them self-discover through the logic that you're giving them with facts on what's selling, what ain't selling. You know, then they're like, okay, well, here's a fee, professional fee, 6%. Okay, like, where do we sign?
Yeah.
So you never have them argue with you when it comes to like the offer comes in, right? And they're like, well, there's another
Well, that's
agent,
what I
I'm
remember.
not going to accept it unless you do this. You've never had that issue ever?
It's a small percentage. It's not really that big of an issue.
And it's a small percentage of listings that you're taking too, right?
It sounds like the way you're presenting it at the presentation prevents that.
Correct.
Any tips you can give to the agents who maybe want to implement this?
Well, if you're looking to implement this commission menus, I mean, the first thing is coming up with a commission, how you're going to design it, whether it's a 0%. Because some agents, they'll do, if they assist the seller, they just charge 3%. Or they could, instead of saying, if I find the buyer, because if you find the buyer, you can either do 4 or 5%. So it's deciding how you're going to present that. And once you have that, just go through it. And I present it with the menu. My listing presentation is very basic. I tell sellers I'm going to cover 4 points. First is going to be the price. Second is experience and credentials. Third is contracts and commission. And 4 is what you're actually going to walk away with. So I go through those 4, then I start my presentation. I show them menu commissions. I tell them I could do 1 or 2 presentations. I can give you the 2-minute presentation or the 20. Which one do you want? If it's a driver, they say, just tell me what the number is and how much am I going to walk away with.
Yeah.
And some people just say, you know what, just give me your full presentation.
Drivers are like, can you sell it? How much?
Correct.
How much and how long?
I like that you get them the option. Yeah. Some people know they want to hire you. You don't need to go through all that. But a lot of agents will. They'll go through the whole 2 hours. And the seller, I've seen it. The seller's like, can I get the contract already?
Yeah, can
In
we
the
like?
role play, I do that. Like, I'll trick them and be like, you know, when we role play, and they say, you know, have you decided you want me to hire? I mean, I'm like, yeah, I want to hire you. And some of them will just keep going right through the presentation. I'm like, guys, shut up, slide the paperwork over to them, and get started.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's the answer to that question.
Make it easy on everybody.
You build a garden, bees come to you. And what we did is we just did our first gala in Fort Lauderdale. We had 150 of our partners fly in.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and you know, we had like a seminar portion, and then we did a black tie, James Bond gala. Everybody's dressed up. It was dope.
Right.
We filmed the